So, good morning, Rachel.
Hello.
Last night, the BBC did confirm, I mentioned it there, that first hostage video being released by Hamas. It shows a young woman speaking Hebrew who identifies herself as a 21-year-old who calls herself Maya Shem. What do you take from the release of that?
Well, I think there's a few different things to say, actually. The first is that, believe it or not, it's good news and it should give us some hope. It's what you would call in the hostage business, the hostage community, if you like, a proof of life video. And it's always the first thing that any negotiator wants to establish, because in most cases, of course, what you're trying to work out is has this person or these people really been taken? Are they still alive? Is there something to negotiate about? And are we talking to the right people, the right group? And so this is a proof of life video, and it should firstly bring us hope that this young woman is alive. The second thing, I guess, is that it's as strange as this might sound, it's a form of communication from Hamas. And in that way, it is a step forward. They are clearly trying to say something, and the authorities will be going over this with a fine tooth comb to figure out what they're saying and why, and what all of this means. But there is at least an effort to communicate, which again I take, as strange as it might seem in these circumstances, as a positive thing. And then I think the final thing to say, although I have to say rather, about sort of what the video means, if you like, is it's a way for Hamas of sending a message, and I think trying to control the narrative somewhat around who they are and what's happening. Yeah, we have to work under the assumption that the video was scripted, that this young woman did not choose freely of the words that she used. That would certainly be true in other proof of life videos. And so I think it was no accident that she talks about, as you mentioned, receiving medical treatment. I think she says she's well looked after. She pleads for her life as well, as you have rightly said. And so to me, that says something potentially about Hamas trying to say, we're appealing to our base. We're not the people we're being painted out to be. And it's an attempt to sort of shift the narrative and how they're perceived.
It's striking. This is your area of expertise, and we should say, obviously, not just in this war. Looking around the world, but the phrase "proof of life" video. Because how do you have to take that at face value? Because as journalists, we're used to trying to date things, find out when they're from. Obviously, I'm talking to you live right now on the radio. It's happening at the moment. But how do you take that as proof of life without knowing more?
So there will be a huge process that's going on behind the scenes right now. The authorities will be combing over every last detail of this video. They will have their technicians looking at the file type, all of the sort of, I'm no technician myself, so I leave the boffins to do what they do, but they will be poring over every technical aspect of this. They'll be looking at the video and saying, what can we see in the video? What can we hear in the video? Are there any messages in the video? They'll be trying to establish, the answer to questions like, when was this video recorded? Can we sort of get any idea about where it was recorded, who recorded it, and so on and so forth. So a proof of life is a proof of life that at the point at which the video was created,
Right.
we have to assume that person is alive. But it is a positive sign, but the authorities, as you rightly say, will be combing over every last detail to try and understand the where, when, who, and how of this particular piece of footage.
It may be just how things are this morning as I talk to you, but again, I wonder from your perspective around, they say at least 199 hostages. In this instance, it's a young woman. Is there anything about that?
It's an interesting question I've been asking myself this morning, actually. And, taking women and children as well in these in hostage cases is really unusual. So I suspect it's not an accident that it's a woman that's been taken. I think it possibly, and I'm speculating here, but I think it possibly tells us something about an attempt to project some strength here on the part of Hamas. I think it possibly also links into the fact, there's been so many calls, from minute one of this situation, at least let the women and children go. And so there's a question in my mind about whether it sends both that strength message I mentioned, but also does it inch us towards a message of, okay, let's start talking about the women and children? I may be pushing that too far. I think we're all trying to read into this as much as we can, aren't we? But
yeah, well, it also brings to mind a report by Anshel Pfeffer, who wrote in the Times, I think it was last week, that there was division within Hamas. His sources had told him that about whether that strategy of taking women and children was the right one, that somehow he had heard that from his sources, that there'd been division on that point. But as you say, people trying to take what they can from the limited information. And talking about information, also trying to be aware of people's security. Is it what does it do, and what is the impact of knowing this individual's name, knowing this girl's name?
Yeah, if we look at hostage cases generally, and there are many cases every year around the world, what negotiators and governments will usually say to the family is, stay quiet. Let's keep this out of the headlines as much as possible. And the reason that they're doing that, and you can argue about the pros and cons, but their rationale for doing that is, as one negotiator said to me, you can't unring a bell. Once a name is out there, once a face is out there, it can never not be out there again. And from a negotiation standpoint, what the negotiators are trying to do is figure out who's got this person, what is it they want for them, what are we willing to concede, and how might this play out? And until you understand who's got them, what the motives are, what the parameters for negotiation are, you can't really decide whether it's in the hostages' best interest to have them known or to not have them known. Is that an advantage or a disadvantage? I think in this case, I can't possibly put myself in the shoes of families who are in a state of utter terror right now. But I suspect part of their calculation of releasing family members' names and photographs is, of course, this is a situation that isn't just about hostages. There is a conflict going on. There's a very serious conflict going on. And there are, we're anticipating at any moment Israeli forces going in on the ground as well. And so I suspect from a family perspective, some of those old rules kind of have simply gone out of the window, because what they're trying to do, understandably, is to keep their family members alive, to keep their name alive, and to keep them prioritized alongside all of the other priorities, which are kind of unfortunately at play here, as well as the plight of the hostages.
You mentioned there the families and some of the decisions with the limited power they will have. And as your specialism is hostages, you will have talked to, I imagine, families around the world when their loved ones have found themselves in this incredibly distressing and tragic and scary situation. What is it like for those families at this time?
Yeah, and in fact, my own family has experience of this, which is how I kind of ended up doing this with this area of expertise. And I can tell you from my experience and many families that I've talked to over the years, utter terror that goes without saying. This is a terrifying situation. The information point is absolutely critical here. Families are desperate for every shred of information about their loved ones. And, the thing that's so difficult about these cases is that on the one hand, there's so little good quality information available. And on the other hand, there's no shortage of misinformation, even disinformation, conspiracy theories, rumors. So for families, they're constantly trying to get hold of every shred of information they can to try and sift through and work out what the plight of their loved ones is. And that's why it's so critical, that relationship between a family and the government, which is responsible for negotiating, because they're often privy to information that it's important they release to the family. A sense of helplessness. We heard that from the British families in their news conference a few days ago, this sense of trying to maintain hope but feeling utterly helpless. And I guess the other thing, and this is always something I say to any family I'm in touch with, is, unfortunately, you might be preparing for a marathon rather than a sprint. And And as difficult as it is to, make sure that you get sleep and make sure that you eat and rest, and as sort of silly as that advice can seem in the middle of this dreadful circumstance, it's really important for families that they're getting that advice and that they're sort of trying, if they can at all, to preserve their energy, preserve their strength, because the days, weeks, and possibly longer ahead are going to be tough on them.
Rachel Briggs, Chief Executive of Clarity Factory and Associate Fellow at Chatham House, who's writing a book as well about hostage taking and hostage diplomacy.